Hey, and welcome to Matt and Jess TV. I am Matt Roast here with Jessica Bun Bun. We've made it, guys. This is our True Detective Night Country Episode 6 reaction and review. The finale is here. We're all in the Night Country now. We now have a chance to talk about what really happened. I'm so excited.
Oh my God. I was so excited. I didn't
Yeah.
even have an inside voice anymore. Like they got straight to the business, like right away there in the ice caves. I absolutely loved this finale. It was so good.
Yeah, it was sensational. I loved almost every second of it. There's only one thing in this finale I didn't like, and we'll get to that later, but it's not even a big thing. It's just I will say this. I watched the final 2 minutes of this finale at least 5 or 6 times. And between the, you never really leave in it, like that line, the final shot, the music. I'll admit it, I was crying when I watched that. And I was like letting the music and just the vibes kind of, but I don't cry a lot with TV. It's like,
no, that's true.
It really affected me. Like Issa Lopez, here's your applause. You did it. I'm so satisfied. And yes, we are prepared for all of the feedback to the finale.
Listen, this season has really divided people.
Yeah.
And, it really surprises me because I love it so much.
Yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. I've loved the callbacks to season one. I know not everybody has, but like I feel like the callbacks and connections have been used really well for the most part, like with the Tuttles and stuff like that. Russ' dad up there, pointing to where everything is. I really enjoyed it. The cast was really good. I mean, I haven't made any secret about how much I love Fiona Shaw. So seeing her in this, I was already like totally sold on it. But in general, I really like the explanation of what was going on. We learned a little bit in the last episode about, the pollution, the connection with the Tuttles, with the mines, with what's going on at the lab. I had a theory about there being a secret lab in the ice caves, which totally turned out to be true.
Yeah.
I was so excited to actually have a win on one of my theories because, that doesn't always
You did
happen,
it.
right?
You did
I did
it. I was wrong about a lot.
It didn't work out exactly the way that I had thought, but it was pretty close.
Yeah, I love it when a finale can, give you it gave you something that you had hoped for. It gave you a win on one of your theories, and I really like that. For me, it gave me a lot of stuff that I did not necessarily predict or expect. And I know we'll get into it. There are people who may have thought like certain parts of this were going to be true, but like all of it collectively, I had not seen a lot of people speculating that like every single thing that happened in this finale was going to happen. I know there's going to be 2 commenters right now who are typing away that they called it all before it happened. That they
Good for you. You take your win.
Yeah, you take your win. You do your victory lap. Okay, so before we do get further here, and we have a lot to get into, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss any other coverage that's happening. Also today, we had the finale for Monsieur Spade over on AMC, a show we really loved, and you can also check that video out as well.
Also, if you're looking for more like murder mystery that's still on the air right now, we're still covering Death and Other Details, and Fallout is coming very, very soon. Walking Dead also coming up. We're going to be covering that as well. So stick with us, hit that subscribe button.
Okay, it's really hard to sort of go into exactly where to start here, but here's something that, we don't always do. Let's try to do a little bit of chronological order here from the start.
Yeah, we don't do that here.
There's a lot of things to sort of piece together here, beginning with really your big win and sort of discovering the tunnel between this ice lab and Salal, which this reminded me a lot of Clue, where you have like the room where you go from like the observatory over to somewhere else.
I thought the exact same thing when they went through the lab and then they opened up the hatch there. I was like, I feel like I'm watching like them going through the painting.
Yeah, it was something where I had thought maybe you were right in the sense that, okay, these were connected, but I still kind of was just like, okay, how would they have done this? And it didn't dawn on me for some silly reason. It's like, okay, if the mine owns where the ice caves are, these are miners. They can dig a tunnel. They can do whatever they need to do in order to connect these 2 places. I got so hung up, I think, on like the geography and not knowing where anything was in relation to the other thing, where it's like, of course they can find a way to figure this out if they're trying to hide some sort of like really dark secret.
And Clark is alive. That was a win that we both had. Lots of you guys had that win. Lots of you guys thought he was alive. He's absolutely alive. So we had this whole sequence where they're like chasing him down when they finally get to the hatch and they're in the lab. And they find out that part of it does have to do with pollution, but not in the way that they thought. So originally they had thought that maybe the mines were using the labs to like fudge numbers to make it that they were kind of hiding how much pollution's really going out there, and that that's what the secret lab was all about. And that's sort of what I thought it was going on in that lab as well.
Yeah.
But really, it was more about this like DNA that they were finding, and that they were like, listen, the pollution, it was helping us out, and it was helping us out in a way that we can't even explain. So we were like, pump up the pollution, make it, more and more and more, so we're able to extract this DNA faster, more quickly, like all of it. That was the real reason that they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah, that was such a cool reveal, and
Yeah,
it's
it
not
was.
something I necessarily thought of in that way of like, okay, these scientists genuinely believe that they are on the cusp of something huge. And
Yeah.
ultimately, this was, as we get into more and more of like what actually happened to Annie K, like this is a murder that in their minds was a murder all about science, where it was just sort of like, we think we are close to some sort of huge discovery that's actually going to radically change the world. And, who knows if that's actually true? If you're
Yeah.
up there researching for something a long time, you get kind of in the weeds of it. Maybe your head inflates everything, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that these scientists are so obsessed with this idea of getting answers, and they see Annie K come in and just start destroying a lot of their work. And it seems like what happens to her from there is, their anger, their frustration, they're just like, how dare you come in and do this? And it's just like they're obviously not seeing the real forest through the trees here. It's like, okay, yeah, some of your research is gone, but this is a human life. You're taking a human life just for what you claim is the greater good, which is like so, infuriating. And it explains further, of course, why Clark unravels in the way that he does in the aftermath of this.
Yeah, I had originally thought that Clark wasn't going to be involved in it. My theory was close, which is that Annie discovers the secret lab that's in the ice caves, which she did, and that some of the scientists killed her, stabbed her, which they did. But I didn't think that Clark was necessarily involved in it. And he was and he wasn't. So he
Mhm.
wasn't involved in stabbing her. He was at the side being like, no, stop, and
Yeah.
all that. Okay. That's where I got my W. And
Yeah.
then she ends up still being alive, and he goes over and finishes the job.
Yeah, and it's hard to really interpret why he does what he does at that point. He might be thinking, okay, Annie is dying already. We're out in
Yes.
the ice caves. There's probably no saving her. I'm going to try to just put her at peace a little bit faster. The thing that I expected that Clark was going to find out about presumably what the scientist did or whoever killed her at some point later on, and that was going to really sort of make his descent into madness a little bit faster. But I was thinking that whole time with this sort of lens of, okay, it's probably Clark who did something to all of the scientists. And he, you've had this whole theory
Mhm.
about a revenge tour for most of the
Yes.
season, and that was probably where that was going to be initiated. But
Yeah, I thought he killed all the scientists.
yeah,
That he was on a revenge tour for Annie, but instead he seemingly was just really going into madness about what he was working on, but also the guilt that he was carrying around about what happened to Annie and
yeah.
his involvement.
I feel like he did genuinely love Annie, and I think that's something that he cared a lot about and he had a lot of regrets over. I mean, he still should have made a lot of different decisions along the way. If you really, really love Annie, you could have done more to actually get justice for what happened. You were a witness, you were there, you could have done something more. I know he is descending into madness, and I know there's a lot of different layers to what is going on here.
Yep. And ultimately he ends up dying out in the freezing cold. And but before he does, we saw that Navarro actually got a confession from him. So by
Yeah.
the time we get to the end of the episode, to actually make sure that everybody knows exactly what's going on, what the lab was up to, what the mines are up to,
Yeah.
he gave this full confession on video, and Navarro left it for Danvers, and it leaked. Oops.
Leaked. Okay, let's get supernatural for a moment, people, or supernatural, or whatever you want to call this. So, Clark, in his sort of discussion, interrogation, whatever you want to call it, with Danvers and Navarro. He gets a lot into, amidst his madness, how Annie is basically sort of everywhere, that she has always been there, and
Hmm.
that is sort of, I think, a real representation of a lot of what we have been seeing all season. I think the show intentionally leaves it open as to, are certain characters like, like Clark, like Navarro, like, Rose, are they seeing ghosts? Are they seeing people who are real? And I think there's no wrong explanation for a lot of it. Like for me, I kind of sense it as a combination of spirituality, a
Hmm.
little bit of intuition, a little
Hmm.
bit of just sort of the feeling that in this place that, is extremely important, in particular for Inuit people, that there is
Hmm.
this connection to the land and this connection to the people who are a part of the land, and that Annie K is a part of the people, and the people have always been there, and her spirit, the things that she represents, have always been there, and sort of the collective spirit is a little bit of what is haunting, Clark in this moment, and what continued to haunt Clark, in that all of Annie's ancestors, everybody up there, knew exactly on some level what it is that he did, even if there was no evidence or any of that at that time. We'll get to the actual evidence a little bit later on, but that is sort of my, that all of that combined, with trauma and not being able to let things go, like that is sort of the amalgamation of how everybody is sort of seeing what they are on this show.
Okay, this season dealt with trauma a
Yeah.
lot from many different characters. I mean, we saw it last episode and this episode a lot with Pete and
Yeah.
what he was going through, killing his dad, having to actually take his remains and put them in the water, everything that he went through to get to this next spot where Rose was even like, this isn't even the hardest part. Like
Yeah.
just wait till you carry this with you for the rest of your life, sort of thing, and that trauma that's going to come with it. The same with Danvers. We even saw little pieces. We saw Twist and Shout. It was
Yeah.
back on at the lab. There was a hubcap that was rolling down the hallway that was probably in her mind, remembering the car accident and
Mhm.
everything that happened there. I mean, there was just so much happening. The Orange was there again, sort of with Navarro and losing her mom, and Julia and everything that had happened there. It was really about dealing with some of their trauma that was away from this particular case, and some of it that had come into this case,
Mhm.
just like season 1. That is something that they dealt with there. There was trauma that was outside that was coming
Yeah.
inside. And so we did have a lot of scenes with just the two women that were talking through their trauma, dealing with some of the trauma. I mean, even at one point we had Danvers actually lean into what Navarro had to say about when she was like, I saw Holden, this is what he said. And she was really, resistant at first, but then was like, okay, let me know. And I feel like it was a really healing moment for Danvers.
I think it was. I think so much of this season was about fighting through and overcoming things in your past, and
Yes.
seeing a little bit of the light that can still exist within darkness. And that's why, and we have a video going through the spiral and everything that sort of represents, and we have a link
Yep.
for that in the description below. But one of the big things that we've sort of noted in there is that darkness is a lot of season 1, where we're about sort of descending into this darkness, and I think a lot of season 4 is about kind of coming out of this darkness and about sort of finding ways to see the light on the other side of it. And I think there are a lot of representations of how that happens in the finale. And I think for Danvers and Navarro, they see each other and they understand each other perhaps in a way that they never have before. And I'm not saying that, anybody's life at the end of this finale is going to be all hunky dory or anything, but I think they can perceive the world differently now. I don't think they will be haunted in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, we even had sort of a clear up of this flashback with Wheeler and what actually happened, which is, Navarro's a person that ended up just straight shooting him, done.
Yeah.
And Danvers admits to her, was like, if you hadn't done that, I was going to do that. Like,
Yeah.
we were actually on the same page about it.
Yeah, like they both understood each other, but they still have that collective memory that they shared of having to go through all of that, having to, cover it up and hide it, and like those things exist. It's all about the various things you carry, and is there any way you can let some of this go? But since we're already on the subject of Clark and you have mentioned season 1, I will get off my chest on one thing I did not like in this
Okay,
finale.
let's put
All
on our
right.
what's your beef that we have on our beef hat?
Okay, this one's I'm once again, I am ready for the commenters. I have my shield, I have my sword, I am ready.
We have our hard hats.
Yeah, I'm
Let's hear your
prepared.
beef.
I did not like the time is a flat circle coming back, especially in the way in which it did, where Clark is like,
Okay.
time is a flat circle and we are all stuck in it. I'm sure there are people out there that are like, but you know what? We already had the spiral. We already had Tuttle United. Like we
And
already,
Russ Dad.
yeah, we have enough connections to season 1 to know that, everything is connected and,
Sure.
the Tuttles are still out there. I think they gave us just enough
Oh my
season
God, they
1.
got away with it again.
I know they got. There's just enough connections here to season 1 that it feels like it's a part of the universe, but not that it's fully reliant on season 1. It doesn't change anything with season 1. I think they handled it perfectly, but that line, it was too much of like, okay, we get it. We know that everybody loved it when it was time as a flat circle in season 1. It felt too obvious. It went from like these things that were symbolic or even just Tuttle United, something a little bit more abstract, to like a specific line that was iconic on the show before. And I didn't need it. You could have thrown that out. It was the only time where I was just like, okay, all right, come on. We get it. We understand.
Okay, let's talk about the thing that I think everybody's going to be talking about, and I think everyone's going to be very divided about
Yeah.
on whether or not they like this reveal of what happened to the scientists or they do not like the reveal of what happened to the scientists.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what happened. And there have been people out there that have speculated that, we learned the names Beatrice and Blair, but, we've seen the character with the missing fingers a little bit before. And there's been a lot of questions as to, okay, was this person involved? And if you were one of those people, congratulations. You do get your imaginary gold star now. Give yourself your W.
Absolutely.
You figured that part out. And how it all happened was fascinating to me. And even still, it's all been framed as a story. Like, it's not something that
they're necessarily admitting to, even though there was the handprint there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear that even if not all of this happened, that most of this happened where, these characters, they ended up discovering the tunnel that existed there.
Mm-hmm.
They saw everything. They got enough of a sense here as to exactly what it is that really happened way back when. They were able to sort of piece everything together. And beyond all that, even if you just take Annie K out of it, and I'm not trying to do that, but even if you just do, they got enough of a sense that basically these scientists were polluting and basically killing the entire community.
Yes.
And they weren't necessarily doing it like right then, right now, but they were doing it for years to come. Like what they are doing was going to have a widespread impact and a widespread trauma. And that's why, to me, I really understand then why it becomes like this group collective effort where they're just sort of like, we have to put a stop to this and we're going to do it in whatever way we deem necessary. We will find a way to do it, that there's not any direct evidence, and we will all cover for each other. And I think it's this idea that the land and preserving it is so powerful and so important to them. And we've already seen, signs of damage to it, whether it's the very start of this season, whether you want to say the one-eyed polar bear, it doesn't necessarily just mean that. We've already gone into a lot of the other meanings for it. But I think all of this sort of shows that they've already made their impact in a really bad way here. So they all kind of just decide collectively, we're going to do this. We're going to put a stop to this. We're going to heal things. They weren't able to get Clark, obviously, because Clark was hiding in the hatch like Desmond. But like there was a lot of other stuff that they were effectively able to do.
Like Desmond.
Make
Listen,
your own kind of music.
we all love Lost here.
Yes.
Not Desmond, though.
How dare you? How dare
he was
you?
not my favorite character on Lost. Oh, stop.
Desmond, forever. We'll see you in another life, brother.
Oh, my goodness. No, so that is what happened. They kind of came across this by happenstance with the mop water going into the tunnel. They figured out on their own what was going on. They had said to Navarro and Danvers, why would we go to the cops about it? You guys, nobody's helping. So what's the point? So we decided to take it into our own hands. We got to do what we got to do. So they ended up all going to the lab. They gathered all the scientists that they could find, except for Clark. They couldn't get back into that hatch because he was holding it down locked. And they took everybody that they could find, put them in a truck, drove them out to the ice, had them like stripped down. They folded all their clothes and was like, you go out into the darkness and whatever happens to you happens to you. If Annie gets you, she gets you, and if she doesn't, good for you.
Yeah, they basically had sort of spelled all this out in a way where they allowed nature to decide
Correct.
ultimately their fate. And it's something that I think this show is playing around with a lot. This idea of like, okay, you go out into nature, and if you do find a way to survive, you can come back. Maybe you will come back as a different person. Maybe you will come back and be able to build yourself back up again. Like, these clothes are a part of your identity. They are still there, but
Mhm.
because this is such a just a cold and frigid and desolate sort of area, like there's no real chance that any of that is going to happen. But it does explain a lot of things. However, Annie's tongue. What happened to Annie's tongue? This is, I think, this is the big question they intentionally don't answer, because every single person has made it clear that they did not put that tongue there. Are they all being truthful?
Somebody's not being truthful. Like something doesn't make any sense. Like it does. The story does seem that it's, the scientist killed Annie. Hank was called in to move the body. They moved the body, cut the tongue out to make it look like she was being silenced about being too, vocal about what's going on with the mind, sort of thing. It's a warning to everybody. But how did the tongue end up back at the lab? Nobody's taking credit for it.
I feel kind of like one of the scientists must have at some point cut off the tongue, found a way to bring it back to the lab, whether it was just some sort of like, I don't know, sick memento or reminder or something that they plan to use down the road if they really needed to. And then ultimately the message was still sent with the tongue not being on Annie K. And just amidst all of the chaos that happened, something must have happened to get that tongue there. I think it's once again the show playing around with spirituality, where we all can kind of say, okay, maybe it was just a part of the message that it just so happened to be there. But I think in the world of True Detective, there's usually like a somewhat logical explanation for things. So that is what I'm going with for now.
Navarro, let's talk about Navarro.
Yes.
She is now gone. She has left. She's left her job. She left her place. She, we already said left Danvers that confession from Clark, left the one eyed polar bear after we saw Danvers kick it out the door a couple episodes
Yes.
ago. I
Yeah.
guess she picked it up and brought it back, which was really nice. And it was cool to have that sort of last shot of, Danvers sitting on her porch, and then you see Navarro kind of appear. Now, is she dead? No, I don't think so. I think it's just sort of like there's a connection between these two women.
Yeah.
But one thing that I also liked that was a bit of a connection to season one was seeing Danvers sitting in front of that camera, sitting, in front of everybody, explaining the story.
Yeah, I love that too. I cannot say enough about how much I love the last 5 minutes of this finale. Like,
Yeah.
I think it is just pure exceptional, just perfection all around. Like, I love that scene with Danvers. I love Danvers not really giving these people what they want, because she feels at peace with exactly everything that has happened. Like, she finally has something she hasn't had. Like, we get an update on her and Leah where they're doing better and they're
Yeah.
smiling, and there was a part of me where we were really close to the end of the finale. I was starting to worry we weren't going to get that. And even though Leah hasn't been my favorite character, I would have been really mad if we didn't get that final scene with them in the car, because it just sort of it gave me that closure. And that last scene, this is what got me. That last scene with Danvers outside in the light, and then in comes Navarro, or the spirit of Navarro. I don't think Navarro's really there. I think
No.
this is just a memory of her, but it's something that means something to Danvers, because it's like now Danvers knows that even in a professional capacity that she's not alone. Like, she has a partner that's really there for her, and that just sort of alongside the words, no one ever really leaves, just the music. This is where this is where Issa was just like, I got this. I got the best ending. I can't, I mean, season one's ending is perfection too, in its own way. It's really hard to compare the two, but
Yeah, they're not comparable. I know there was ties all season to
yeah.
season one and season four, but these two seasons are very different.
I Here's where things are going to get interesting, and we can have a little bit of a debate, because there's technically not a season 5 at the moment. I think it's inevitable that there's going to be one.
Yeah.
Do we see Navarro again? I'm kind of torn on this, because there's this part of me now that kind of wants to see Navarro somewhere else, where we get an update as to where she is, what she's doing, but it's also the ending of this season was just so perfect in a lot of ways where we know everything we need to know. I'm kind of all over the place with it, but I wouldn't mind seeing some sort of echo of Night Country again.
I don't want to see Navarro again. I think her ending was just a 10 out of 10. It was so perfect. She's out there in the world. We don't know what she is doing, but we know that she's at peace with herself. She feels good about what she did with Annie, about herself, about everything that's happened. It just can't get any better than that for me. And
Yeah.
going into season 5, I just want a whole new story.
Yeah, I want a whole new story, and I think you can still find a way to drop in connections to the Tuttles if you want and still sort of build up like something larger. Here's my long term, because I don't want True Detective to end anytime soon. The final season needs to be the takedown of the Tuttles. And the final
Yes.
season, I think we've mentioned this once before, the True Detective Avengers. The final season needs to be the True Detective Avengers, where you find a way to bring back at least some of the characters we have seen over the years. They're all able to get together. I mean, maybe this is too corny, but like if you can find a way to just maybe bring back 1 or 2 people and actually destroy this entity once and for all. But for now, I am just happy to have another story, another place. You know, give the team time to come up with whatever they think is right. Don't rush this. This is what happened that made season 2 bad.
No, there needs to be no rush. Don't do season 2 again. Take your time, get the story right, come back. We'll be waiting.
I am really sad that this is the finale, but I'm also glad that this wasn't longer than 6 episodes because I just feel like this was the exact amount of time that was needed to tell this story.
I was wondering if this was going to be enough time, but it was absolutely enough time without like really any filler.
All right, so that's it. We're out of the Night Country.
Oh, we are into the light.
We are into the light. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with us all season, sharing your theories. This has been a total blast, a thrill for us to do. And be sure to hit that subscribe button so you guys don't miss anything else. Jess already said earlier, we have Fallout coming up. We're still doing Death and Other Details. If you do want to watch our Spiral discussion, we have that for you there right in the card.
Yep.
Also, join our Patreon and get some more exclusive content there. And thank you so much to our patrons for your support.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys here next time.